inside the darts of the blouse. What could be a Travis is grandly graced by my throwing arm. All the girls are getting less really softer? Is my face really fuller? Am I just imagining it? More pills, once. No, I'm not imagining it. I knew about the outer changes, weight migrating,
surrounding,
softening, but I am not prepared for the inner changes. These are intense, sudden,
disorienting, emotional
hypersensitivity,
crying at the weirdest
burnt
things.
soup, dumb pop lyrics. I fight it. What am I fighting? Who am I? The new me, the old. What is happening? And then I learned to stop fighting, to accept the changes, to trust, to see them as integral, natural.
And that's when all tremendous euphoria takes over. I see myself in the mirror and think close.
Thank you, guys. I just want to say this is called Creators in Concert, and this couldn't happen alone. My works that are being played tonight are not mine. They belong to Mark Campbell, Kimberly Reed, and me. We've been working together since we created As One, and Mark and Kim and I have created 2 other operas together. Kim and I have done a song cycle together along with some other composers, and Kim and I are now starting a new opera together. So this is really about creators, and I wish they were both here. They wish they were here, but they're both away out of town, busy tonight, so they're here in spirit, and I just want to acknowledge my team. So the next up is from our second opera together called Sunlight Emerges, which was commissioned by Houston Grand Opera. And when they approached me, they said, we'd like you to consider a piece that has some relevance for the city of Houston that would be meaningful to our community. And I had spent a summer in Houston, and I didn't really like it very much. And I kind of didn't really know what I wanted to write about, but I did have one thought. And it may be because my wife is an artist and we live in the realm of art. Rebecca has always bringing me art and ideas. And so I was thinking, okay, what about, there's a great museum there. Oh, the Rothko Chapel. And so I proposed to Mark and Kim that we would write a piece about the Rothko Chapel, and I made up a bunch of characters, and I said, all these people come into the chapel. It was the last building, last big commission that was of Mark Rothko, that was commissioned by Dominique de Menil, the great arts patron, and the building was designed by Philip Johnson, and it was meant by the de Menil family to be a sanctuary, a place for people of all faiths and no faiths to come to reflect and to have dialogue about trying to make the world a better place. And it was to be a place for art. And there are these very austere, purple-gray, huge canvases by Mark Rothko, and that's all that's in this octagonal building. So I proposed this idea to Mark and Kim, and they came back with this story that had two layers. One layer is the story of the conception of the chapel, and Dominique de Menil is the main character, and the struggle between Rothko and Philip Johnson. And in between that story is played out a story that takes place in every decade from the time the chapel opened in 1971, chronicling somebody's story, and each story reflects a social and political civic issue of the time. So the one you're going to hear tonight, sung beautifully by Taylor Raven, is called George Washington into Mona Lisa. And Taylor plays Cece, a teenager who was forced to leave New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina and was taken in by a family. And she's a sort of, typical teenager with a lot of attitude and gets herself into a lot of trouble in her new environment. But she finds herself in the chapel and has her first encounter with art and the creative process. So, George Washington into Mona Lisa.
Ought to get myself home. Been here 2 hours. Got schoolwork to do. Hate schoolwork. Hate school. Poor Miss Franklin, not her fault. She teaches American history. The same dumb facts over and over. The same dumb What would make him do that? What would make him think I need purple here? That purple here. Purple you only see when you look for a long time. Just answer your own question, dummy. Need to get myself home. Been here 2 hours, over 2 hours. That host family sure didn't know what they were getting into when they took our family in. Must be testing their Christian fortitude. Sure is testing mine. So they call this a chapel. Not like any church I've been to. Only go to their church 'cause of the singing. But there is singing here too. How did he do that? What would make him do that? Ought to go home. But just a few more minutes. For the
So we're going to close the musical portion of this evening, thank you, with a preview of a work still in progress. Today It Rains is the 3rd opera that Mark and Kim and I are writing. I'm still tinkering with it. In fact, we tinkered with it yesterday. It was commissioned by Opera Parallèle and then co-commissioned with American Opera Projects, and it's going to open in March in San Francisco. We've had a fabulous time developing the piece together and have just finished we did an orchestral workshop this summer, and now just doing final revisions to the score, which is going to be sent off in about a month, thank God. So many notes and slurs and accidentals, and all you composers out there know what that's like. Anyway, we're doing 2 two excerpts from the opera. Today It Rains is inspired by an event in the life of the artist Georgia O'Keeffe. You see what happens when you are married to a painter. Rebecca was reading the correspondence between O'Keeffe and Stieglitz for about a year and a half, because it's about this many letters. And it was like in our life all the time, and it's sort of like, I think I have to write an opera about Georgia O'Keeffe, who's such an iconic figure and an important artist, but a modernist and a strong woman of the 20th century and a real American figure. So Nicole Paymont from Opera Parallèle asked me if I had any ideas, and I said, well, I was thinking about this, and she said she loved it. I'm a woman conductor. There aren't a lot of us either. We should do this piece. And so I talked to Mark and Kim, and they came back with this amazing story, which is inspired by a real event in her life. In 1929, Georgia O'Keeffe and her best friend, Rebecca Strand, also an artist, both of whom are married to important artist Alfred Stieglitz in the case of O'Keeffe, and Paul Strand in the case of Beck. They needed to get away, and they got on a train from New York to Santa Fe, and any of you who know Georgia O'Keeffe know that the rest is history. So on this train in 1929, a train is a great place to set an opera because you're on a journey, so you can sort of play with time and go into imagination the way you do when you're sitting and time is passing and the landscape's passing. So this piece goes back and forth, and there's a lot of sort of fantasy aspect to it. So the first scene you're going to see is a fragment of scene 2. It's the duet when Alfred wakes up at home and Georgia's not there, and he sees a piece of paper that she's left for him, and it's a letter. And it plays itself out. And I had to choose that scene because, well, you'll figure it out. Okay, the next scene is scene 7, and this is a scene between Georgia and Beck. It's 1929, it's Prohibition. They're getting drunk in the lounge car, smoking and drinking, and they're playing Exquisite Corpse. It was surrealist and Dadaist and modernist. It was a game where you would, and also the beginnings of psychology, modern psychology. So these are modern thinking women. This is a game where you fold a piece of paper and you make a mark, but you don't see what the other person did, and you keep turning it until all the bits, and then you open it up and you get a surprise. So they're in the midst of this drunken game, and they're talking about their lives and their relationships. So those are your 2 scenes, and I want to just thank all my artists. I love you all. You're doing such a great job. So thank you.
That was just wonderful. And we are going to have a little stage set change here. And Laura is going to come back out and join me out here in a minute. Great, thank you all. This is choreographed. Super. Come on out. I reintroduce to you Laura Kaminsky, and congratulations on that wonderful program. It's a pleasure to have a few minutes to chat with you after all of that, and I hope you're feeling good about everything you've heard. They performed it beautifully.
They're wonderful. It was great.
They clearly do it out of love. So when did you in your life know that composition was going to be your mode of expression, was going to be the area of your professional achievement? When did you become a composer?
Those are different questions. I kind of started making up music when I was, I think, about 10. And then I took piano lessons. My family's here, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. And I was not really a great pianist, and I got really bored practicing, but I like to make things up. And then I couldn't remember all the things I was making up, so I tried to figure out how to write them down, and that was sort of the beginning. But I never really thought I was going to be a composer. In fact, when I was 13, I guess, I auditioned to go to music and art high school, and I was going to do an art portfolio.
Visual art.
Visual art.
Okay.
And then I didn't think I was very good at that, and I didn't really think I was very good at performing anything, but I thought I might have a chance because I'd written some pieces, so I figured out enough to play them along with the standard repertoire that I had to audition with. So I went to music and art, but there was no composition program.
Okay.
Then I didn't go to music school for college.
So when did composition become a way of life?
Now. I mean, it was always what guided everything I did, but I didn't have a career as a composer. I worked as an arts producer and presenter of cultural events, and then as an academic. So I was always composing in the cracks, you know, very early in the morning when I was supposed to be doing boring reports in my office. I remember sitting at the dean's meetings when I was the dean. My students are here. I shouldn't be saying this. Well, you just know me as a teacher, but I was the dean at Purchase, and I used to sit in these really boring dean's meetings every week, and I just could barely stay awake. They were really boring. And I used to write music, and I tried to make it not look like music so I wouldn't get in trouble, but I couldn't have another week of meetings about whether we were going to move the start of classes by 15 minutes. And I was like, okay, I'm going to just keep working on this music.
So when was the first program of music by Laura Kaminsky at some venue?
Oh, gosh. Well, I have to say my sisters, Nina and Karen, are both here, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but I think when I was about 12, and Aunt Blanche brought those marionette puppets back from Mexico, and I made up an opera, and they were the characters. Do you remember this at all? Out at the beach?
I remember you directing us in a bunch of things.
Yeah. But professionally, when I went to college at Oberlin, but I was a psychology major. But I was composing then. So I started a series of concerts called Extra Conservatory, meaning outside of the conservatory, for all of us closet composers. And so I started producing concerts there. That wasn't really professional, but that's
It's so funny how you have spent a life with a foot in the producing realm and as well as the creative realm.
Yeah, actually, I think why I was so nervous today was that I wasn't producing this.
Okay, so we'll talk about the control issues later. Now, what I find really interesting about your work is that you tackle real topics about the world that we live in. But at the same time, your works are about real, vivid, emotional people. So how do you blend topicality and timeless humanness into a single work?
Well, I have to first off say that the words come from Mark and Kim. And so they give voice to these characters. And we are all of a mind about this, that people are the best way to express social, political, cultural, human issues by having your audience believe in the characters. And so when we talk about making a piece, it's like, we want to do a piece about this issue. I mean, I never thought about writing as one because I wanted to do an issue opera about the transgender experience. Not at all. But as we began to take this is going to be a real thing, it was clear that the only way it was going to work was that if our character was somebody you would know and had depth and had a personality, that they weren't just singing a storyline or telling the issue, that they had to be three-dimensional. So for me, whenever I get a text, and actually this is not just true for opera, but I have written some songs, and I have a wonderful collaborator, Leah Madry, who's a playwright and a poet, and I set a poem of hers last year. It's the same thing. You have to set the words so most of the time they can be understood. I mean, that has
Most
some
of the time.
most of the time that has some value. And then when they're not to be understood, there's a reason that they're not. But for me, the way the words are set has to resonate with their meaning, and the way I find the meaning is I have to believe the person who's telling it. So when I was developing Hannah's music, I had to, first of all, I have to memorize the libretto. Then, once it's internalized, when there's a pause, it's because in my mind, I'm actually seeing that character embodying those words in their realm as a human being. But that's not exactly answering your question.
Well, it is, because opera about a theory is a hard opera to sit through for me. That's an expression of personal preference. That it's difficult to have an opera that's just about an idea as opposed to an idea that's told through people. And I think you've combined the people story and the important subject matter in a way that's really wonderfully contemporary but timeless.
Thank you. I mean, again, this is a creator's conversation. It's not just the composer. It's Mark and Kim. So when we were invited to submit an idea to Houston, as I said, I made up, I would like people to go into the chapel, and I want some of them to go inside because they had a terrible thing happen in their life and they were seeking a place of solitude. And here are some of the terrible things that could happen. I want some of them to go because they like art and they wanted to have that experience. And what does it mean to be moved by art? So I gave that all sort of generally to Mark and Kim, and then they came back with this construct. So there's a character who is there who's like a worker dude. He's out laying cement outside on the street, and he comes in to cool off, and he came in because there was air conditioned. And he's like, this is a weird place. And then all of a sudden he has this connection. Like when I make the cement sidewalk, there's an art to that. And it's got to be a certain way. And I get my pride when it's right. That guy made those weird paintings, but he made decisions. Oh, I get it. So it was that story. And then there was the story of Alicia, who finds herself there because she was at a funeral of a close friend who died from AIDS, because the Rothko Chapel was a place that many people who had been shunned could arrange to have funerals. And her story, as a Latina lesbian activist, her friend who died was some very conservative, wealthy, white Southerner, and they were the unlikeliest of friends. So she's confronting social difference and the prejudice around AIDS in the chapel. So these people became three-dimensional, and social and political issues were addressed, but they were personal.
It's wonderful. I hear from composers who set the libretto they get. And I read the correspondence between Verdi and Ghislanzone, where Verdi opines about every word and every syllable that is in the libretto. What is the nature of your collaboration with your librettists?
Oh.
In 30 words or less.
I should sing it. It's complicated because in all three of these operas, it's two librettists. So first I have to get their words, which however they work together, and I always joke, one of you writes the verbs and one of you writes the nouns, but it doesn't quite work that way, and they've done it differently in different pieces. Sometimes they've divided up characters, sometimes they divided up scenes. I mean, sometimes they talk it out. But when something doesn't ring true to me, and this is actually, I think, one of the most important conversations about opera collaboration. If it doesn't ring true to me, I usually, I'm not sure what to do with it because I'm not believing those words. It doesn't mean that they wrote bad words, but I'm not getting it. And so I come back and I'll say, I'm not quite getting what's the motivation, or this doesn't ring true, or she would never have said that, or that response seems inappropriate. And so then we have a long set of emails. And Mark and I both kind of get up at 5 in the morning. So by 5:30 or 6 in the morning, there could be 10 hysterical emails between us. And then Kim chimes in very calmly about 8 or 9 hours later with yes. But we're all involved in that discussion. The hard question, and we've talked about this, and I think I may have talked about it with Greg Spears, who's out there. When something doesn't work, is it because the libretto was wrong, or the composer didn't get the libretto, so the music was wrong, or like you can never separate that. And that's where it gets so vulnerable. Because if I'm not getting the libretto, it doesn't mean it's wrong, but if I can't get it, I can't set it right. And if I can't set it right, it doesn't ring true. So then I failed the libretto, but the libretto's failed the music. And so how do we work our way through to that compromise where the words work, the storyline flows, and it's true for me so that the music will then support it and flow.
Do you have those moments too where, okay, the words make sense to you, it's flowing, but there are 2 extra beats in the text that are not flowing with your music?
Yeah, I mean the first time, when I started doing As One, I knew nothing about this realm at all. I didn't even know a lot of operas, so I had no idea what I was doing. But I remember, and Rebecca, you probably remember this, I could not set one line of text because it was in the Christmas story that you heard. And the original line was, and I'm at my little rickety table. But the rhythm of that did not go with the Christmas music that I was writing. And I must have spent like 4 or 5 days just over and over again. Like, well, if I change it here. And I finally said, I have to ask them to take out the word little. And I'd never asked for a change before. And I was in agony. And I wrote this long explanation and why it didn't work and everything. And I went to bed about midnight. And I knew that by 5 a.m. there'd be a response, at least from Mark. And I woke up and I ran to my laptop and I opened it up and he wrote, fine. And I was like, oh, I had like an ulcer over this. So it's gotten easier.
That's fab. Now, before opera, and even concurrent with your opera work, you're an instrumental composer. But what is the difference between composing where you are doing it in the context of characters in a story versus composing in a more absolute, just aesthetic space?
It's different because of the words, but abstract instrumental music also has a narrative and has to have a logic and has to have an emotional, dramatic, and intellectual flow that makes sense. So it's not different in that way. Where it's different is that 3-dimensionality of the human. And so, you know, and I think I may have said this to you. If you're listening to a 25-minute instrumental chamber piece, say, you know, for mixed ensemble, and there's 10 seconds that are kind of boring, it's not as much of a crisis as if there's 10 seconds where you don't believe the character in an opera.
Right. Is it difficult when you're done with an opera to say goodbye to those characters?
I've been surrounded by Hannah for a long time now. She doesn't go away. No, I think that they kind of live in me for sure, and especially it becomes so real and 3-dimensional because all these beautiful artists with whom you work, I mean, they're so concerned about singing the note perfectly, and like, of course you want that, but that's not the most important. Like, once that's done and they've learned their part, it's how they go into the spirit, how they embody the soul of those characters and the motivations and the emotional core. And once you've gone there with a singer and they've been vulnerable in giving that dimension in their performance, you know them really well. So there's just something very profound about this. I mean, I think that's what's been so wonderful about this for me, this adventure in this field, is this huge sense of open, supportive, vulnerable community. It's really remarkable. And, you know, Opera America is kind of the hub.
Well, we may be the hub, but you're the heart.
Takes two.
Teaching. What is the most important advice you've given your students?
What do you guys think I would say? I have to say I'm really very excited tonight because there are some current students and some former students, and they're all here, and it really feels great. First of all, I don't think you can teach composition. Composers are composers. I think you can guide young composers or emerging composers to help them figure out how to ask the right questions of themselves so that they know what they're saying. And in the very beginning of composing, you're really making a decision from note to note. You know, should I go to an F sharp or should I go to an A flat? You know, and you're thinking very granularly as you're learning how to build your sound world. I can help. Does this make sense? Does this flow right? I can also say, no, you can't do that. That note doesn't exist on that instrument. You know, they're technical things. We can talk about notation. You know, all of that is teachable. But the ability to really teach somebody to compose, I think. I think a composer is a composer. They just need to hone their skill. I think the main thing that I've always said is you have to be honest. And I've had lessons with students where they come in, and you know, it's a little bit easier now when you can use a computer program to generate. It takes less time in a way than copying it by hand. And I've said to students, you kind of copied and pasted a bunch of stuff, and so you look like you did some work this week, but I don't believe this. And there's a silence. It's like, you're right. I said, okay, why don't you go and use this hour the right way, and write something that you believe in, and when you have that, bring it back. Because there's no point in doing it if it doesn't come from truth.
True about composition and so many other things.
Well, it's all a metaphor. That's why we make art, right?
Before we go out into the lobby and continue the conversation with Laura, I wanted to draw everyone's attention to the brochure that we have for our entire season of onstage activities. If you don't have one at your place, there are plenty outside in the lobby. In 2012, on September 28th, which is tomorrow, we opened the Opera Center. So we are 6 years into the Opera Center. And just a few years before that, on September 28th, Laura Kaminsky was born. and tomorrow is Laura's birthday, and I do believe that there is a message from the back of the room.
Uh-oh. How did you know?
I just want to point out that even though that was 5 artists singing, they were all one character. We thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
We wish you a happy birthday, and we're so glad your family is here for this event. Let's go out into the lobby and say hello to people.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.